Welcome to another episode of Fintech Talks, and I'm so excited here today to be with my friend Carey Ransom.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Carey, would you mind giving a quick introduction about yourself?
Sure. So currently, I'm managing director of a fund called BankTech Ventures. And for the last 4 years, we've been operating BankTech Ventures as this combination of market intelligence, research and development for the banking industry. So we've got over 100 banks around the country that look at us as an extension of their team to go out and identify all the emerging technologies that they should know about and potentially bring into their bank to help them digitally transform, evolve, and continue to remain relevant, competitive. And on the other side, we aggregated all of them into a fund that allows us to go out to all those entrepreneurs and find the ones that really make sense for us to also have an economic piece of through investing in them. And so often we're either participating alongside other venture firms, or in many cases, we might be the only outside investor or a lead investor, and really trying to be that bridge between that really innovative future world of banking and the thousands of banks that still remain in the US that need to continue to evolve to recognize that change that is, all in front of us that we get to see every day.
Oh, wow. How did you get into the space?
Sure. So about a dozen years ago, my last two startups, I've been an entrepreneur most of my life, and did a lot of B2B software related startups across a number of industries. My last two were consumer fintechs. And so I got into the world through consumer fintech and built a couple companies there. Through that, got to know some of the partner banks that work with consumer fintechs. And I just so happen to also have a 100-year family history of a family business involved in a local community bank.
Oh, wow.
And so sort of had both the fintech background and the perspective on community banks.
Yeah.
And during COVID, a couple of my now partners came to me. They both run banks. I knew them both. And they said, we think there's an opportunity to pull a bunch of us and our peers together where we could have this collective effort help.
Yeah.
And we really need somebody that can both run this, but who also understands the entrepreneurs and how they play a role in this partnership with banks. And so I kind of fit weirdly in that space where I knew enough about the pieces that I could bring it together. And then my partners have been super supportive as we built this over the last 4 years. And the part that they play a key role in, which is so necessary, is they're willing to be those tip of the spear first banks in many cases when we need to pilot something or need to prove that the technology or the solution that this entrepreneur has built actually can work. And then we can go roll it out to a bunch of other banks as it makes sense.
Well, one of the questions that comes to mind from that's a really interesting family history and background. To be devil's advocate,
Sure.
why do we even need like community banks? Why do we need what like aren't the market needs served by like large national banks?
Yeah, great question. And the answer is no. I mean, if you I grew up in a town of 15,000 people, and when I was a kid, there were two banks in that town. Now there is only one community bank still in that town. You've got a couple branches of what I wouldn't call national banks, but more maybe a regional bank. But in smaller towns than even this one, all over the country, if the bank leaves, it ultimately becomes a funding desert. And you have these business owners, and you think of the main streets of our country, and in many cases, the community banks are the ones that have been lending money and providing banking services, whether it's storing deposits or helping them move money for decades. And these business owners need that financial advisory help to help them maintain. Maybe it's a seasonal business and they need to navigate through the seasons. Maybe it's just the growth capital that they need to grow their business. I mean, most businesses, are not raising venture capital. They, or even in many cases, private debt or something that we see at these macro levels. But these community banks are boots on the ground, really serving the farmers, the Main Street business owners, and they've been doing that very dutifully for a long, long time. A lot of these banks that I work with have been in their communities for well over 100 years, and they are the pillars of that community. And for them to leave, it often causes significant deterioration to just the economic flow of that community. And so they are the majority of small business loans. They are the majority of agricultural loans.
Yeah.
And since the financial crisis, we've seen almost no new bank formation, but we still have over 4,000 banks in the US, and many of them have a very focused area, whether it's geographic or industries, that they just know deeply and are committed to, both in the focus of their business as a bank and also to the underlying customers that they have a big heart for, to want them to help, that just keeps the money flowing in this country. And as you know, we're unlike any other banking market in the world.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's made the US economy so resilient and unique.
So a couple of questions. We're obviously talking about fintech, but I wanted to get your definition of what is bank tech.
Sure.
And then also, when I've spoken to community banks versus large banks, or there's a difference in, like one of the statements I've heard is like, from the community banks is like, we have one bullet in the chamber, whereas like the big banks might have multiple, and then so they have to be much more selective as far as what they do. Is that also something that is that a true statement?
So I think in some cases, especially historically,
Yeah.
I think there is this, failure is not an option kind of mindset. It's a conservatism.
Yeah.
And we're trying to change that. We're trying to encourage them to try more things and have faster iteration cycles.
Yeah.
Like you can still learn through failure. You just don't want it to be a year-long project and your only project of the year that ends up not working. Right? So they tend to have, I agree with you wholeheartedly, that they tend to have a high degree of certainty preference.
Yes.
And so that's why in many cases they don't want to be first. They want to say, show me a bank that looks like me, how to do it, that I can feel confident that we're capable of achieving similar results to what somebody else has done.
Yeah.
I think the challenge I see is that banks historically, if you look backwards, often look pretty similar to each other.
Yeah.
But as we look ahead, I have this strong belief that they're going to need to look much different from each other to have a niche that they can serve and serve well or better than most others.
Yeah.
And so that will require them to at times maybe take a little bit more risk than they're comfortable with, to go in a direction that is a choice, and saying, we can't be all things to all people in our community. We may need to just serve commercial businesses and do that great. Or we may need to serve a particular industry of commercial businesses or a segment of consumers that could go beyond our community, but that's going to require some choice. And choice, I think, often does require a little bit more risk, but our job, we feel like, is to help them plan and navigate through that to the best you can, and at least identify where the key execution levers are that are necessary to hopefully achieve the kind of success that they'll need to. And those could be even things like marketing, Sanjib, that maybe historically some of these community banks haven't been particularly good at or allocating the right level of budget to.
So in order to address that, like, can you talk a little bit about what is bank tech, and then also when entrepreneurs have business models that address the bank tech sector, like what kind of advice might you give to?
Absolutely. So the first one, bank tech in my mind are things where you want to provide value to and through banks that is enabling them. So we often will use the term bank enabling, in that it is enabling a bank in some way. So it could be making them more secure, more efficient, new forms of revenue, maybe through the bank providing more value to their customers in some way. And so we look really across the spectrum of the operations of a bank as all potentially opportunities for, as I said, new sources of income, or it could be cost savings. It could be customer impacting or customer facing. It could be purely internal to the operations, to making them more efficient, effective, et cetera. So in other respects, it almost could look like vertical markets software, just focused on banks in some way to help them through that change of digital transformation, evolution, diversification, et cetera. So that to us is the umbrella of what we would call bank tech. And so I generally look at it and say, if I'm an entrepreneur, having more banks that I'm working with is
Yeah.
generally better.
Yeah.
So it'd be like, I don't need one as if I'm a fintech that needs a partner bank. I probably want a whole bunch. So I'm going to have to start with 1 to 2 to 3
Yeah.
to then get to hopefully double digits to
Yeah.
hopefully eventually get to hundreds.
Yeah.
And so that curve of just having banks as customers or partners is really how we think about bank tech. And so then to the business model side,
Yeah.
usually that means you're going to have a business model where banks have some sort of economic exchange with you, which could be traditionally
Yeah.
licensing software of some kind, or could be some sort of a transaction fee related business, depending on what the relationship is between the provider and the bank. Or it could be something that flows all the way through to the customer where you're sharing in some revenue
Yeah.
that's generated through the bank to customers. So there is some creativity and opportunity in business model, and I would even say business model evolution.
Yeah.
And especially now as we're seeing AI
Yeah.
or AI-led solutions, in some cases they're coming to banks and saying, we're going to enable you to do more with fewer people or do new things that you've never been able to do before that could have huge value creating opportunities for you with your customers, or just in the way that you could now be way more operationally efficient or different and differentiated in what you can do. So I often will say, we're trying to encourage the bankers to get their creativity
Yeah.
to think better and differently about the future of their business and how they can work with their customers.
Yeah.
I think similarly, the entrepreneurs naturally often bring that, and we try to be that matcher of, okay, I think we have some banks that may be ready to embrace a new way
Yeah.
to do things with you. And I think that's where a lot of the fun is in putting these things together.
I love that you call it fun.
Oh, it's super fun. I think that's, we feel like we get to almost be this translator between these two worlds that often don't fit together or work together nearly as effectively as we think they should be. And ultimately, when it works, it benefits everybody. It benefits the entrepreneur, it benefits the bank, and it usually also benefits the bank's customers.
Absolutely. And when we first, I believe we first met like 22, sort of in the early days of BankTech Ventures. And now that you've had, for, nearly 5 years, what types of deals have you had the most fun with?
Sure. I think the ones that start to open the mind of the bank are probably the ones that I tend to have the most fun with, because I look at these banks and they have been such critical parts of these communities all over the country. And in many cases, it's easier to just keep doing what you've done.
Yeah.
And so where I tend to see the most excitement is when I see them almost opening their mind and going, okay, we kind of know we're under threat. We kind of know we're going to have to change. You start to see them feeling some of that success, and they get the feedback from their customer. Oh, this is great. This is what we've been looking for. Or all of a sudden we're more efficient or faster to do something. We're eliminating some of this work that we've done, and it's been painful to do, but we've done it for years and years and years, and now all of a sudden that's automated. Those are the things where I go, this is not the end. This is now the start of a new way of thinking about your business. And what we see is often it builds on itself. And so then the next one becomes that much easier, and the next one. So it's that gateway to change that I think where I see the most excitement, because we know how important they are and will continue to be, but they can't continue to do things the same way and open branches and say, come into the branch and the bank if you want to do business with us. They have to start meeting people where they are on their terms. And we've seen this in all these other industries where when people have done that, they've changed the type of relationship they have. And it can still be a really strong relationship, but it's, make the house call to the customer. Don't make them come to the doctor, if you will.
Yeah, I completely agree. Anytime you can change the way someone thinks, I think,
That's
especially in what you're doing, and that's the mark of success. Another mark of success is something that actually rubbed me the wrong way. We were, a few weeks ago, we were waiting to board the same plane.
Yep.
And I walked on the plane. You were sitting in first class, and I had to walk back.
Yeah.
And I had to give you some flack for that.
Absolutely.
I mentioned that to one of our mutual friends, and he said, "Well, you know how much Carey flies, right?" So I was like,
right.
so I figured I had to ask you about that.
Well, one of our, and I think you're right. I mean, I have traveled nearly every week this year.
Wow.
And part of our value system at BankTech is we said, look, we know community bankers in their markets, they show up. They show up to their customers. They show up to the community events. They show up. They show up to their state associations and their national events. They show up. And so we said when we started this, we need to meet them where they are. They often aren't going to FinTech Meetup or the kinds of events that we also go to.
Yeah.
So we don't necessarily have to just show up to those.
Yeah.
We have to show up to all these other set of events where we're the only people there who are thinking about innovation and change and technology, and meet them where they are.
Yeah.
And so we said, we know the community banker ethos is we will show up.
Yeah.
And so if we're going to build those long-term relationships and trust with them, we have to show up too.
Yeah.
And so that's led me, I haven't counted how many states I've been in this year, but it's probably 30 that I've been to for some type of banking or other event. And it could be a single bank's board meeting. It could be a leadership offsite where they're trying to do strategic planning. It could be a local or state association meeting where they say, we want to talk about innovation and change or AI or stablecoins. And we really need you here to help us dedicate that time. And so we show up. And so as a result, I've been on a lot of planes and I ultimately have earned my right. I have not bought a first class ticket.
Okay.
I absolutely earned it.
Well, I don't feel so bad now, and I don't envy you.
There are times where when I'm in 3 or 4 cities in the same week where I don't envy myself either.
A different topic. Obviously, we met at as well at Fintech Meetup earlier this year. Can you talk a little bit about your Fintech Meetup experience and what that was like?
Yeah, for me, I mean, I love those quick one-to-one meetings. And if I'm sitting in my office on a given day, I'm probably doing the equivalent of a FinTech Meetup all day long, right?
Yeah.
I'm meeting with founders, I'm meeting with bankers, I'm meeting with partners. And so it's sort of my natural personality. So when I heard about this event, I said, oh, this is perfect for someone like me. I'd love that. Let's have a quick conversation. Let's see if there's a connection here. And then we can't just get it all done in that time, but we can start to build a relationship that can endure. And I'm a very relational person. And so to me, the structure of FinTech Meetup was so perfectly designed that I was one of the first ones to say, I will be a part of this. And I think on every level, it has achieved the kinds of goals that I think both the event has to just bring people together and then allow them to connect. And because I think it's much more deliberate and strategic in how you can plan and be there versus just wandering around and hoping for serendipity to occur. And so I think you have hit on both like the best future version of what a lot of these events need to be about, because that's why most people come there. Most people come there to meet. And so I think when you build it around that and then you get the serendipity and the other things around that, it's the right combination. And I just have found it to be one of those can't miss events because there's just such high value that comes out of it.
Well, that's great. And I would say that you might be a can't miss person to meet at an event like FinTech Meetup.
For the right people. I mean, as I say, we're definitely not for everyone, but if you're trying to work with or through banks, we're probably a can't miss group to meet.
And so if an entrepreneur is at FinTech Meetup who's wants to work through banks, how, and any words of advice that you would give to them in order to maximize, the mutual benefit of meeting you?
Yeah, what I would say is, I mean, I'm easy to find. There aren't many Carey Ransoms in the world. I'm pretty active on social media. So I'm generally pretty easy to find and try to be responsive. But we are, as I said a moment ago, we're pretty focused. So if you are trying to work with or through banks and you see a solution to help banks be better in some way as they want to become the best future version of themselves,
Yeah.
then if you can articulate what you're doing, why you think that is the outcome,
Yeah.
we're always happy
Yeah.
to meet you. So my advice would be, as clearly as you can articulate that to us, almost treating us like we're banks, because we're really on the first level thinking about it from what's the value to our banks
Yeah.
as an extension of the teams of hundreds of banks that we work with.
Yeah.
Then if we can determine, oh, they're likely to agree and do this too,
Yeah.
then we probably are both a partner and a potential investor in that business.
That's great advice. And you know what? We're obviously in a very exciting time for the industry. You mentioned AI, you mentioned stable coins. Like looking out to the year or two ahead, like how will that world be different than, let's say, the last year or two?
Sure. I mean, if you think back to the last 5 years since COVID and what's happened in financial services and particularly in banking, it has been a wild ride. I mean, in many respects, you could look and say it's surprising we haven't seen more failures than the few that we saw a couple of years ago in banks.
Yeah.
So much resilience and I would say even conservatism has been built into the bank system since the financial crisis, which now feels like a lifetime ago. And I think that's shown that a lot of these banks are very resilient to change, because we've seen interest rate change like we'd never experienced in our lifetime. We've seen huge liquidity that got injected into the system during COVID that's now migrated and moved around quite a bit. And so I think the biggest change is going to be, can banks retain the levels of deposits in the banking system that they need to continue to be a key economic lubricant for all the lending that they've historically done and for their communities and the economies that they operate in. And so to me, that's like the central key item. And will things like stable coins and tokenized deposits be a threat and a risk, which it can be, or can it be an opportunity and the next version of how banks will navigate the traditional banking world to this decentralized finance world? And what's that mix going to look like 2, 3, 5, 10 years from now? And I think we all know where we sit, change is not going to slow down, and you're going to have to pay attention and adapt and evolve to find your place in that change. But I don't see a world in which we have no banks. I think there are pockets out there that believe that's a possibility. I think we probably will see fewer than we have today. But banks will continue to have a key role to play because of that trust and because of that partnership they have with the different segments of communities that they serve. And most people don't want to be their own bank. I think they still want to have a partner that they can rely on for safety and security and trust around their money.
That's a great vision of the future. And once again, thank you so much for flying out here. Making one more flight.
Absolutely. Yeah, happy to be here. Great to be in New York, and always fun this time of year.
And look forward to seeing you at Fintech Meetup.
Absolutely. Wouldn't miss it.
Okay. Thank you.